꽃을 든 여자 할머니라. 당신은 또 꽃을 든 할머니네. 김학수이 언제 또 꽃까지 이리 들고 있어요. 대구 미국 좀 와서 좋대요. 지금 미소를 지우고 있어요. 네.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to say how honored I am to be here and to be a part of this. I guess it was a couple of years ago when both Judge Singh and Judge Tang asked me to be the co-chair of the Mora Committee, and I said, well, you do realize I'm Japanese American? And she said, yes, we do realize that. And still they wanted me to be a part of this, and I was really honored, and I thought it was so important. You know, when I first came to San Francisco in 1978, it was really the Korean community that embraced myself and other activists. We were involved in a case of a young man named Cho-Soo Lee, who was wrongfully convicted of a crime here in Chinatown, and the community really got behind him. And it was through that experience that I really learned about the Korean community and really how much they have done and given to our country. And this memorial, I think, is such an important day for history and for justice, because this is going to memorialize the suffering that so many endured during World War II at the hands of the imperialist Japanese. I see my former boss here, Jeff Brown, and Congressman Honda, as well as many other elected officials, and just very honored to be part of this event, and thank all of you for making this happen.
In 1992, in the courts of Japan, 3 women who were victims of sexual slavery under the Japanese military armed forces testified and won in the courts in Japan. And from that courageous moment, the 3 voices became trumpets across this nation and across the world. Today, San Francisco is the major city of this country that has erected a memorial to the comfort women, to the victims of sexual slavery. And I just want to say to the leadership of this city, thank you very much. And it's not about being Asian or not being of another country or anything else. Like, it's about being a human being. This is a human rights issue. And I think that the message that we are sending from the Golden State to the Golden Gate, from the city of San Francisco, is never again will we ever victimize girls and women during times of natural disasters, during times of conflict and war. This has to stop. And so, to Grandma, my girlfriend, said, 감사합니다. Let me give a shout out to one group also. The Global Alliance for Telling the Truth in the Sino-Japanese War. They're the ones that put up the exhibit in Stanford University where I first saw it. And it ignited the fire in me to make sure that this does not happen again. That every person, regardless of your station, that you will speak up and speak out for the girls and women of our family, of our community, of our nation. Thank you.
アジア太平洋地域13カ国にわたった何十万人の女性と少女の苦しみを表しています。その女性たちの大多数は戦時中捕らわれの身のまま命を落としました。この暗い歴史は生存者が勇敢に沈黙を破った1990年代まで何十年も隠されていました。生存者たちの証言は世界を動かした結果、戦争手段としての性暴力が人道に対する罪であり、加害国の政府が責任を負わなければならないと国際社会が宣言することとなりました。この記念碑はこれらの女性たちの記憶のために捧げられており、世界中での性暴力や性的人身売買を根絶するために建てられたものです。
Our worst fear.
After death, and falling day after day after day, and living the hurt of a wartime, comfort woman, bonded to man. We do remembered. Thank you.
Karen Koramatsu has always been with us. So those of you who think Japanese Americans are not with us, please listen to Karen Koramatsu.
Thank you. I too want to congratulate Judge Lillian Singh and Judge Julie Tang and the committee who worked so hard and tirelessly to make this memorial a reality. My father never gave up hope for almost 40 years that someday he could reopen his U.S. Supreme Court case. And Julie and Lillian epitomize my father's commitment and dedication to standing up for what is right. They never gave up hope. San Francisco is an international sanctuary city. We are the gateway to Asia. We have the responsibility to make sure that the rest of the world understands the lessons of history so we don't repeat them again. We need to continually bring out the atrocities of World War II, even in the 21st century. And education is the key so that we don't make the same mistakes again. Through the Fred T. Koramatsu Institute, we have created curriculum kits we send out to teachers across this nation and around the world. So since 2011, we've impacted over 1 million teachers and 2 million students in all 50 states and 12 countries, including Japan and South Korea. Go to www.koramatsuinstitute.org and have your teachers, your children's teachers and any teacher that you know sign up for these kits. And also what we're going to be doing is now adding the curriculum for the comfort women. We need your support as well because we make sure that these materials get into teachers' hands free of charge. Otherwise, they won't be teaching the lessons that they should. Especially now, they need to know in places like Oklahoma and Chicago and North Carolina, Alabama, the South, the lessons and the atrocity and the human rights violations that the comfort women had to endure. Those are the areas that we need to reach. And thanks to Julie and to Lillian, that this has become a reality. The Fred T. Koramatsu's mission is education to advance racial equity, social justice, and human rights for all. And as my father said, don't be afraid to speak up. Thank you.
My name is Mike Honda, former Congressman. The meaning of this unveiling of the monument to reflect the victims of sexual slavery during the 30s and 40s to the end of World War II is to let people know and teach people about what had happened to girls and women under the guise of war, under the colors of war. And people may say that this is an issue that happened 60, 70 years ago, which is true. But the Japanese government, not the people, the government is still a organized organ that existed then, today, and tomorrow. So the importance is that we recognize sexual slavery, human trafficking, violence against girls and women and other people like children during times of conflict, violence, and natural disasters has to be recognized and prohibited and abolished.
Well, today there's a op-ed piece in the San Francisco Chronicle from the Consul General saying that this memorial actually will hurt the Japanese people, is aimed against the Japanese people. You would argue that that's really not the case.
Everything I said was not against the Japanese people, nor Japan. It is against Prime Minister Abe, who knows well enough and whose history, his family history, his maternal grandfather was a prime minister and a pardoned war criminal during World War II. He knows what's gone on, and he avoids it And whether it's because of face or because of pride, those things have to be put aside today in order to have reconciliation, not only at the community level, but on the global level. And I would hope that someday he will see the light.
Are you concerned about the rise of nationalism and xenophobia? They've tried to censor the textbooks in Japan to eliminate this part of history. I mean, are you concerned that this is a danger to people in Japan and the world?
It's a danger to the world because Santayana said, if you don't learn from your mistakes of the past, you're doomed to repeat it. That's one. Two, the people are ignorant because they were never taught. And that was a conscious move by the government not to teach their children. Three, Japanese Prime Minister Abe wants to be a world leader on womenomics. He gave that speech to the UN. He wants to provide that leadership. He wants that leadership. The leadership bid rings hollow in the light of the lack of apology. And he tried to change our textbooks of this country. He's trying to use his arm of the consulate to change the minds of our people here. So as a government agent, he's interfering with our political process. But that's okay. We will show him that our system works and that the truth prevails.
And there's been a rise of xenophobia, racism in the United States, immigrant bashing, it seems the Japanese community is going to face the brunt again after what they faced during the war. Are you concerned about that as well?
Well, not the Japanese American community per se. I think that Asian Americans in general may end up being victims of politics, of bigotry, because of war hysteria, which put the Japanese Americans into camp in 42. So we have to be vigilant on that. Members of Congress, many of them understand what happened. And so I think that we're in a better ground. If we had movements like this in 1942, we would have never been sent to camp. There would be too many people that would have questioned it.
And the American government legislature apologized to what happened to the Japanese Americans, and not the Peruvian Japanese, but the Japanese Americans. The government of Japan has not taken the same apology. Would you call for them to do the same thing the American government has done?
Well, I passed a resolution 121 in 2007 asking our government to encourage the government of Japan to recognize their historical responsibility, apologize unambiguously, and pass politically and lawfully a resolution that recognizes the victimization of the girls and women that they had used as sexual slaves, and also put this data into the history books of their own children. And it passed again in 2014, where it became law. And that's when then Secretary of State Hillary said in Asia, comfort woman is a euphemism. The true terminology is sexual slavery, and that she encouraged the Japanese government to acknowledge that.
Now, there's an effort in California to have this in the textbooks in the schools in California. You think that's a positive thing, that children in California and schools in the United States learn about this history?
Certainly, it's late in coming, but better late than never. And even then, the Japanese government got involved trying to change that. But I think that enough information will be in the textbooks that will point to the issues of sexual slavery, point to the issues of the horrors of war, point to the issues of who makes decisions about going to war. And it's not only the state of California, because when California adopts the textbooks, 6 or 7 other states will follow suit. So it will have a healthy impact on the children of our country.
And there is now, with President Trump, threats to destroy Korea, another war in Asia. What are your thoughts about this? Because there's a lot of growing fear that there might be another war in Asia that could kill tens of millions of people.
If war is your only option, then we're doomed. But I believe that the diplomatic approach, understanding our opponent's point of view and their perception, and having them understand our point of view and our fears and anxieties, and bringing that together and having a positive leadership role, I think we can move towards a continued armistice between North and South Korea, and perhaps even engage the PRC, Russia and the United States and Japan and South Korea to work as a team, as they did in Iran, to encourage North Korea to stop the proliferation of nuclear weapons, and that we find ways to control that and put a cap on it. The elimination of nuclear arms is a long-term effort. We ourselves haven't done that as of yet, but because we're the only country that ever dropped a bomb on people in 1945, we should know better. The Japanese community should know better the horrors of this war, and that should push us to even more ardently pursue a diplomatic agreement and not to move forward and act crazy.
TBS.
TBS.
Yes, Tokyo Broadcasting System.
Okay.
Okay. First of all, can you tell me how do you involve in? I know you've been working on the comfort room issue since the.
Since I was in assembly.
Yes, and then particularly on this, how are you involved? How have you been involved?
Well, let's start with why first. Number one, I'm a school teacher. Number two, if we don't teach children what happened in the past that could be avoided in the future by giving information, having them think better, that would make the future a little bit more bright. Not teaching our youngsters the mistakes of the past, they become decision makers in the future, and they may repeat the same mistakes as in the past. Now, one of the things that happened to me is when I learned about this, the atrocities of war, whether it's U.S. or whether it's Japan or any, the atrocities of war gets out of hand and it has to stop. Whenever there is violence or natural disasters, girls and women end up being victims of violence, and that has to stop. So it's not about only Prime Minister Abe not wanting to recognize the fact that he should be apologizing, but it's the fact that people in this world need to understand the impact of a bad decision during violence, during hysteria, what it can do to whole populations of this world. The memorial is a physical example of a history that we don't want to see repeated. And it's in the tone of peace, not in the throes of war. It's with open hands and open arms, not with a fist. So we want people to understand that, like a butterfly, it has.
I know you want to spread the word, but what's your role in this on this in particular?
The community of San Francisco, through the leadership of Supervisor Marr and the two judges, Singh and Tang, they took up the issue because they too knew that there were girls and women of China that were victims of sexual slavery. So my role was to encourage them, to give them any information they needed. But they needed very little of my help. They took the challenge and brought it to this point, in spite of the fact that the Japanese government, through the consulate, tried to dissuade them from doing this. And people don't understand that Prime Minister Abe put in his own budget in Japan $60 million to fight this whole issue worldwide.
Yeah, the reason the Japanese government is opposing to it is that the some figures and some facts are not or misinterpreted.
Well, we have Japanese scholars, historians, Chinese historians, U.S. historians who all agree that this had happened. Now, if you want to go back and quibble about, if you want to quibble about, yeah, I know, but if you want to, they want to quibble about numbers, 100,000, 200,000, 430,000, one was too many.
So the figure 220,000 women was victimized. Is that the correct figures according to the?
Well, I just told you that there's numbers between 260, 240,000 to 430,000, depending on what historians you looked at and depending on where they studied. I mean, some people have more information than others, but the fact that hundreds of thousands of girls and women were victimized is unacceptable. But if they were your mother or your sister or your aunt or your grandmother, one would have been too much.
I still haven't read the inscription yet, but I think I heard that some it says something about the sex trafficking.
Yes,
You know,
the issue of
openly adult to
the issue of kidnapping girls and women during the 30s and 40s was sex trafficking. It's sexual trafficking. It happens today. This is why, if Prime Minister Abe wants to take a global leadership, he should see the opportunity of recognizing what happened in the 30s and 40s. He wasn't alive then. He could accept the government's responsibility, recognize the historical accuracy, and put it in textbooks, and then become leader of the world and saying, we understood, we did it, we know the devastations that it caused, we don't want to see happen again. We should provide that leadership because from knowledge. We had slavery in this country, and now we're saying slavery in any form is unacceptable. We're not a perfect nation, but in our imperfection, we still have the responsibility of providing that leadership to eliminate slavery, whatever form it takes. If Abe does that, he has the moral and historical base to be able to say, we learned from our past, and it's something that we have to eliminate. And he will have that.
So you were saying that
gravitas.
What Japan did in the past opened the door for the sex trafficking in the modern world.
No. I'm just saying that was an example of sex trafficking. Today, the relevance of sexual trafficking is still going on. Human trafficking is still going on in many countries. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, they captured 300 girls and sold them for slavery and as wives. That's unacceptable. Another country, but the issue of capturing girls into slavery is unacceptable, and we in Congress have spoken up on it.
I'm a bit worried about those monuments. Probably divide the.
I don't. When you talk about peace and reconciliation, you bring people together. It's like a man and a woman who are married, and they have a big fight, and they leave. And someone comes in and says, let's come back and let's talk about it, find out what had happened. And when they recognize their differences and accept it, they can get back together again. If I cut you, or if you cut me, I will have a wound. But if it heals, that healing is stronger than any part of the other part of the body. So healing, reconciliation is a strong, strong bond to move forward, not to separate.
But not all the people favoring the installment of the statue.
Oh, who doesn't agree?
I mean, apparently the Japanese government or.
Well, the Japanese government is not, they have a right to their own opinion, but they don't have a right to their own facts. And the facts say this happened, it's wrong, and apologize. Slavery happened here in this country. It was wrong. We recognize it, and we're correcting it. And we're still working. So, no government, no country is perfect. It's working towards perfection that should bring us together.
What do you say to the Japanese Americans who are against the statue?
Are you third generation of
Sansei, yeah.
Sansei. Okay.
What do you say to the Japanese Americans who are against the statue? There's certain groups in Southern California and probably even San Francisco as well.
Now, those Japanese Americans, if they accept the fact that our government, the U.S. government, apologized in 1988 and said, we're sorry, and here's reparations. If they accept the apology, they have no grounds to say that this is wrong. And if they were born before the end of the war and they accepted the apology and the reparations, they have no grounds to say this is wrong. If they were born after the incarceration, then they should start to educate themselves and understand that when something is wrong, you apologize, you move on. You forgive, but you don't forget. You try to do better. That's what we're all about.
Now, a lot of the revisionists say that you were paid by the Chinese Americans or that you're working for the
They
Koreans?
said I was paid by the governments of the other countries, and that's nonsense.
Have you gotten any threats from Japanese right-wingers?
Face. Not through, well, there may have been, but it's okay. Our forefathers faced more dangerous threats than us. Civil rights leaders, they stood up and they died for the kinds of rights that we're fighting for right now.
Now, what was it that really convinced you that this was sexual slavery versus prostitution? Because I'm sure you're aware of that U.S. war report in 1940s that says comfort women were nothing more than prostitutes. Or it's been brought up so many times.
People who wrote that were either ignorant or they were trying to align themselves with an idea that in order to get us a peace treaty between Japan and the United States, they had to say something and mince with words. Prostitutes was not the correct word. And
what was it that convinced you that it was prostitution versus?
The fact that it happened. I looked at the history, and then on Japanese TV, I saw some old Japanese soldiers who had apologized. But that's not being put out in front either, though, is it? So I'm a school teacher, and before I teach a unit, I check the facts. Thank you.
Are you done?
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll ask you briefly. Yeah, first of all, how do you feel now? Today?
Well, I feel really great because when 3 women in Japan that came from South Korea went to the Japanese courts and said, we're not going to remain silent anymore. And they spoke up, even though they had to face a lot of criticism, and it was an uphill battle. And they won the recognition that this had happened. It's their breaking of the silence was the sound that we heard, the trumpet that was blown for all of us to wake up and understand what had happened. And it forced us to look into the issue and look for the information. So people did the research, and through that research, they gave it to a minister in the Japanese government. It may have been Kono, I think. I'm not sure. And he read that information, processed it, and wrote a piece that was to be used by the Japanese government, which was never put into statute in a form of recognition and apology.
Yeah.
And so I was moved because I saw a photo exhibit at Stanford of the atrocities of war in Asia, which no one teaches us in this country. We know a lot about Europe, but very little about Asia. I think that's a question we have to ask our government, our historians, why don't we teach our youngsters more of what happened in Asia? So this movement had put into our textbooks that issue and becomes a point of departure for a lot of young people to study the atrocities of war.
Yeah. Is there any special meaning of this statue, which is first built in San Francisco?
It's the first one in a major city in San Francisco. It's one of 8 in this country, one of 45 around the world. So I think that we need to just keep on teaching people to put up memorials to learn.